Sure, let's start streaming. Why not?
You're now in a different continuum than the world you're used to.
You got to be kidding me.
Really funny. Really funny.
Yeah, it's pretty funny.
Good morning.
Tony Caravan.
You've been subjected to a highly sophisticated form of propaganda.
It's just what you need, and not what you don't.
Hot. That is hot, man.
Really funny. Really funny.
Yeah.
Okay.
You got it, baby. Anyway.
Quality, quantity, and variety.
ROCKFLUX.
Let's get this show on the road.
You know it. And I've got the wife beater shirt on. You ever hear that term, wife beater shirt? Well, if you didn't, it's a choice between that and getting up and turning the air conditioner on and off, which means 2 trips away from the microphone, and I'm not going to do it. My CPU is up to 7.5% already, which means the room in here is hot. So just deal with it. Anyway, good morning, good afternoon. Here we go again. The name of this show is I Like It Like That. Actually, the title of this show is Flow of Consciousness, Mad World. You might not be able to see the word Mad World if you're tuning in. It's the same way I can't see anything on the, in terms of, whatchamacallit, in terms of the chat, because the chat is hidden behind my, basically, monitor. So, be that as it may, we're going to check the left channel.
Channel check. Left channel. Left channel.
Right channel. You know, it's the same old thing, same old thing. Didn't we do a show on that already? Everything's the same. It's all the same. Nothing changes. I don't know.
Okay.
All right. I'm ready to go. What does the 99 mean? An old tie I used to have. It's a tie. What does the 99 stand for? Anyway, the coffee is hot for once, which is nice. And yes, some call this a muscle shirt. Look at those muscles. That's not why I'm wearing it. I'm wearing it because I have to, man. It is just too damn hot. So with that said, I'm going to...
The Weather Watch forecast.
Since I have to justify my existence in front of you people, all three of you, the current temperature outside my studio is 72 degrees. Do you get it? I have the window open. It's already 72. By the time this show ends, it's going to be in like the mid-70s. That's ridiculous. It's getting up to 86 degrees today. And that means in the sun, it'll be like 90. Okay? And there's no relief in sight because getting towards going Wednesday 91, Thursday 90, Friday 88, all those mean 90s, you know, and up. So there's your...
The Weather Watch forecast.
Yeah, so back to the show, you know.
Meow, 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 meow.
It's pretty crazy.
Your papers, please.
I don't have any papers.
Hello. 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 Hello.
Yeah, hello, folks. Hello. One and all from the guy who they're...
Hey, buddy, how's it going?
Well, they keep trying to kill me off. I'm convinced it's a conspiracy. It's a conspiracy. And that's what they're trying to do. And I don't know what to do about it other than just try to keep on keeping on. I used to do voices, but that's when I was young. I used to find some voices very easy to do. It's just a weird thing, you know?
This is insane. This is insane. This is insane. This
Okay. I'm surprised that actually stopped. Let's start things off. And like I said, the title of the show, this is Free Flow of Consciousness, but it's because it's a mad world. You know, it's like that song, Mad World. Right? Remember that's, I don't know, that's a stupid song, but it was kind of weird. You know, there was a lot of music in the 80s that was really just bizarre. I don't know. Of course, after having written 50 songs, beat poetry track songs, you know, who am I to talk about? So our title card today is just a pretty plain vanilla morning show. And I don't know if you can tell from that thing. That's an original. That's one of my original piece artwork. And what it is if you look really closely at it, it's my face. But there's also other stuff going on there, you know. It's kind of weird. There's nothing to do with anything other than it's object art. Something different and original. It's a free flow of consciousness, you know. Who knows? That may appear in my book. Comes out later this year. I don't know. Here's a picture of food from my garden yesterday. You can see, look at all in the, you know, the bed of that are beans. All those beans. I mean, I must have hundreds of beans. And I didn't mess with the color of this thing. So those tomatoes, look how bright red they are. And of course, I grew my own garlic, which is like, I've been trying to do that for years. And so the thing about garlic is you have to plant it in the fall. It overwinters, right? It's like I guess you could put the garlic in now. And what happens is you don't get it till like the following summer. It takes like a year to grow. And those aren't even big cloves, and they were overwintered. I have a few more of them. I tasted one, and it tasted like garlic. But I mean, just to give you an idea of some of the stuff I do, you know. And this is part of this flow of consciousness thing today. Did laundry again yesterday. It's summertime. You just keep washing yourself. And that's why I'm wearing this shirt. You know what I mean? I'm not trying to be an exhibitionist. Not that I have anything to exhibit. But I could smell that Lysol laundry detergent additive in there that kills 99.9% of germs. It's not exactly what I would like. Because the old stuff smelled worse, but you only put a capful in it and it seemed to like, you know, just fade into the background. You know, I'm not one of those people that puts, you know, dryer sheets in because it makes, I don't want to smell anything. I don't want to, like my pillow, I want it to just be normal. You know, my clothes, I don't want them to smell fresh. It's like I got on that rant one time before, but I didn't take it to this level. You know, these people that like are constantly smelling their, oh, I bought this new laundry detergent, how it smells. Or the guy, the soy husband who like took the dog's towel. Did you ever see that commercial? When I used to have TV, I remember that one. And he's like smelling the dog's towel that the dog uses as a thing to sleep on, and the dog's looking at him like, doof, woof, right? Ruff, roll. And then the wife from off camera, you know, yells at the silly, you know, soy hubby. Hey, soy hubby, isn't that Fido's towel? Right? And Fido's like, row, row. Who the heck wants to smell something on a towel? You just want it to be a towel, clean, right? Smell like nothing. And you know, you want to and then you want to come out of the shower and put this perfumey stuff on you. I'll tell you, man, people are freaking nuts. So I'm saying it's a mad world, man. Mad world. And yeah, it is hot in here, I'm telling you. But like, I don't know, from this colander that I just throw, and there's some peppers in there. If you look, well, yeah, the peppers are on the top too, but on the side. But this is stuff that's just growing in my backyard for free, man. I mean, I put a few seeds in the ground, and I planted a seed, and and it grew, right? Isn't that great? It's freaking nuts, man. And it's like, the show isn't about that, but it's just this idea that, how we I watched, because I do this long form video format. All right. I sometimes feel compelled that it's my obligation to watch other podcasters, webcasters, YouTubers who do long form videos. So I watched one yesterday, like almost a 3-hour video, but that Lex Fridman guy, right? And he was interviewing this other guy, and I forgot who the other guy is. I watched it for 3 hours. I mean, I just don't remember the names. The guy's first name was Josh, But anyway, and I've finally come to the conclusion that Fridman is I put him in the same league as Rogan. They're fucking idiots, man. They're dickheads, right? This guy was making some incredible points about like consciousness, the mind, like existence, like the world. He is like this guy is obviously brilliant. I mean, I could look it up. I don't even I don't want to. Because I'm on YouTube, and I don't want to, if I have 2 YouTubes open, who know what kind of cluster thing that's going to create. But anyway, so this guy is throwing out this like wild stuff about somehow how we're experiencing the world, and this not so much like simulation, but kind of like in a different way how we only see reality, which is the way a lot of people are looking. This thing's almost choking me. This 99. Have you figured it out yet? What the 99 is? You haven't figured it out yet. My mail's still up. And I haven't gotten... Oh, I did get a notification. Let's see. Now live. Okay, good. I got to quit out of mail. That eats up my CPU. It was up to 8.4%. Plus the heat does it too. But in any event, so this guy... that's what I tuned in. I didn't tune in for Fridman and his little fluffy animal next to him and stuff, and him closing his eyes when he talks. Like he's like, really, he's just not a good interviewer. And he almost laughed at the guy and stuff a couple of times. And I think, hey, it's just not right, But like I say, I watched 3 hours of the guy, so I gave him that much. So this is I have the right to critique it because I watched it for 3 hours, But he's so political, and this guy was also trying to talk about, Fridman's in that camp. Like these are these people that don't really think there's anything wrong going on, unless it's some ideological political thing. But they pretend as if they're not political, like as if they're scientists of some kind, right? Which they technically have jobs, like he works at MIT or did or whatever he does. He's like a coder or AI type of guy, something like that. Whatever he is, he's a rank amateur when it comes to the interview process. And trust me, I've interviewed some of the greats over the years. My radio days. But these people, and Rogan does the same thing. They pretend as if they're objective, like interviewers, to bring out some stuff. But it's really the guest that, the guest could be just talking like I am to you or nobody. In other words, the screen, and you'd probably get a better discussion because they would just. If they were the type of people that could just do this isn't the easiest thing to do, to talk to yourself. Because in effect, that's what I'm doing. I'm talking to myself. See, a lot of people have trouble even looking in the mirror, really looking in the mirror. I'm not talking about shaving, So anyway, the guy got me thinking, And I really, like I said, I wish Friedman wouldn't interrupted him and like went into weird stuff and his little prepared little paper of questions he has in front of him. And then he's drinking his like energy drink, right? Like nobody should drink an energy drink, you know? I mean, they're just like totally ruin you, you know, destroy you. In fact, I think the problems I've had these 2 recent hospital visits, you know, were basically because I had gone and for about a month or 2 months or more, I was drinking like, you know, mega doses of cold caffeinated colas in the morning shows. If you go back a couple months. I mean, seriously, that's how bad, you know, those things are for you. There's on 17 different levels. So it's another example of the FDA. This guy was even trying to criticize the FDA in a point. And like Friedman was like, I'm a pessimist and I don't know. And he was like interrupting the guy. Or I'm an optimist, you know, so I don't go for that, you know. And this guy was trying to just to explain the world as it is. And he had a brilliant mind. And I was like, man, you're ruining the interview. But clearly the guy had the same opinion I have about people like the FDA. It's like, you know, how the system is, you know, is too in bed with the corporatocracy. And the only reason I'm keeping this picture up for temporarily here, I'll take it down in a second, pardon me, is that, you know, this has nothing to do with that thing. I just had to get my jab in at that guy because, you know, you try to be, you know, give people the time of day and you know, and give back. You know, like I say, I'd like people to watch my full videos for the 2 hours or 1.5 hours, 2 hours, whatever they happen to be on a particular day, mostly 2 hours though. So I'll take the time and I'll watch a long video just because, you know, okay, you know. And I would say every week I'm watching videos, you know, even with this shirt, you know, this wife beater shirt on, I'm still like, it's still hotter than hell in here. So at least I made the right decision. I still may have to turn the air conditioner on. Then I'll be freezing. So you try and just doesn't work out right. You know? And you see that. But this guy got me to thinking. Anyway, so there's my vegetables. Those are from my backyard. This is the house that my mortgage, taxes, and insurance are less than $200 a month. Okay? And I've been getting lettuce, tomatoes, like ungodly amount of tomatoes. Not as many zucchinis and squash as I'd like. You know, I don't know. I only really got about a half dozen, maybe a little more than that. I gave a couple away, so a little more than a half dozen. I would hope I could at least get 2 or 3 more. I like them. I like chopping them up and putting them in, you know, mixing them up with tomatoes, beans and stuff in a pot, onions, mushrooms, sauteing that stuff up. It's just great. It's healthy. Then right before it's done, put some garlic on the top because you got to eat garlic. You can't cook garlic. If you like garlic for flavor, it's fine to cook with it. But you put it on the top, you chop it up and put it on the top and eat it within 5 minutes of chopping it. And that's how you get that allicin, that stuff in there that is antiviral and, you know, it's just a super thing. You know, it's good for you. Good for the heart. Same with tomatoes. When you cook tomatoes, it releases the lycopene. And that's the good stuff. You know, and you put some turmeric in there with the little black pepper because you got to have the black pepper with the turmeric. And, you know, and that's, you know, that's another anti-inflammatory. Everything's caused by inflammation. People just don't get that. But anyway, you know, all you do is you put a seed in and this stuff comes out. I mean, I don't know how many tomatoes. I must have gotten 100 tomatoes or, you know, I don't know. 6 or 7 dozen at least, right? Close to 100. But they're still on the vines, or the plants, I should say. I don't really have them vining this year. In fact, I thought I had determinate tomatoes. Just a little, this is a free flow of consciousness. Learn a little education about things. There's two kinds of tomatoes out there. All right? There's determinate and indeterminate. And generally speaking, like you may have heard of like beefsteak or big boy tomatoes or something like that. And a lot of times those things, unless they're like hybrids or of some kind, they're determinate, which means the plant grows, it gives off its tomatoes, and then it dies out. It's done yielding. Whereas indeterminates are those vining tomatoes. Sometimes you see people have tomato plants that go up like 8 feet in the air, and they have them hung on strings. I used to do that. The problem was I wasn't necessarily getting a big yield. I was just getting like big, tall vines. And so this year I planted like these big boy, but it was like a better boy, it was called. So I think what it was a hybrid of the big boy. I may be wrong on this, and it may just have been a coincidence, right? You know, I don't know. Because I had some of my vining tomatoes, you know, that I'd planted over the winter. I mean, they were growing in my freezing back porch since January. And I put those in the ground eventually, like in July, when it was ridiculous. But I actually had like 3 or 4 tomatoes, small tomatoes, pop out in my closet in my garage. I have a little space heater in there, and grow lights. So, you know, it was an experiment, and like my starts for lettuce and some of my other plants that are out there, maybe perhaps even these peppers. I'm not sure. I don't know if I had the peppers there, but, and forget about beans. You just put the beans and peas. They just grow, right? I mean, and I still have leftover. In other words, inside there, if you let like the thicker of the bean pod or the pea pod, if you have those, I already had my pea harvest. If you let them get to full maturity and then just let them dry out, inside you'll see like a little Jack in the Beanstalk pea or bean, I should say. And you just put that in the ground and water it, and you get this thing. And, you know, the Jack and the Beanstalk story, it's very easy to figure out how they got that, because they just go wild. They just keep wanting to go and grow and connect to other things. I mean, it's freaking nuts. But the point is, I don't have a lot of land or anything. I just have a backyard. A house I'm paying $200 taxes, mortgage, and insurance on. And I'm growing my own food. I've been eating my own food like, you know, end of May, June, July, now into August, definitely into September. I pulled some potatoes out, but I haven't really harvested the potatoes, but I know they're in the ground. And I've got carrots, you know, some squashes that I pulled out that are just sitting. I think there's some more garlic in the ground, and plenty more tomatoes and peppers will be growing over the next 30 days or so. So that's going to throw me into October, and the things like the carrots and potatoes will go into November and December. And then I'll be planning again, starting again over winter inside. And this time, you know, learn a little every year. And this time, who knows, I may have luck figuring out how to do the whole thing inside as well. So despite all the craziness they're trying to throw at people with this climate nonsense, it's like, all I could tell you is the hotter it gets, the more it rains, the better. And what annoys me, it's like the same thing as my critique of the medical profession, you know, which I have critiqued. Let's put the old title card up here. We could shrink. Oh, actually, doesn't really need to be too big, just to get the point across. You can see a little bit of great solar stuff there. But anywho, as they say. I was critiquing life, saying like the medical profession. I was critiquing what? You gotta like stay on target, man. Stay on topic. Climate. So if you have not, but I'm sure you have, because I've seen as I've scrolled through, I tell you, when I log in to do this show, I type in YouTube, or I've defaulted this browser. This is Chrome, since it's native googly thing. Because I can't do this on Safari, because this companies that's that whole idea that through competition, instead of competition making things better, competition has ended up making things worse, because we've moved towards monopolies, these corporations. So instead of like competition improving the product by one trying to produce a better product than the other, it's worked the complete opposite. They like everybody, all that we're surrounded, like I said the other day, mediocrity, right? It's not idiocracy, it's a mediocrity and a mediocracy. Because in other words, it's crony capitalism. It's not like capitalism or anything like that. It's all messed up. And I can't believe I'm sweating and I've got this wife beater shirt on. You'd think I would be cool. And it can't be the 99 that's doing it. You ready? No, anybody figured this out yet? What the 99 is? I'll give you a hint. It's a logo. Okay? It's a logo. I'll tell you before the show's over if you stay tuned. So anyway, the topic or the flow of consciousness, where I was going with this thing. All right. And I was talking about how things are out of whack. And just like the medical profession, the something else was doing, I wish I could rewind, was screwing things up. Now, who was screwing things up? It wasn't the food industry. We know the food industry screwing things up. Oh, climate. All right, where we go. So you can't help. I was talking, the tangent I got on is, so I go onto YouTube. That's my like start page, because I just want to get quick into doing the morning show live, right? So I has YouTube set up as the start page on this Chrome browser, and then I click go live, and then I open up this open source program that I'm using right now that allows me to do all these fancy schmancy things, like have a title card come up, title card disappear. There's my book back there, Codex. Get it. Get some, right? There's the old morning show mug, as opposed to the one I'm drinking out of now, but there's a clearer picture of it. Next time I hold it up, you'll see that I'm drinking out of, well, I'll do it right now. Drinking out of the exact same thing. See? ROCKFLUX. I buy every Game Over hat. Everything you know is wrong, that's a shirt. I buy all my stuff. So, if you turn on the news, or as I do, since I cut the cord, I looked at, I'm confronted with YouTube for a moment before I click the go live thing, right? And it's just all these title cards, of which this is one. This is the title I call it the title card of my show. There's no clickbait there or anything. I just try to get creative with these things, right? With these people. Clickbait with these weird expressions on their face. This is the worst that could happen. Yeah, it's the worst that could happen. You're a YouTube millionaire. You just built a chateau. Some guy I used to watch, like their latest video. hooking up a new generator to the house or something. It's like, come on, man. Why don't you just finish that garage barn? You know, people, you got to fame because people wanted to watching you building and doing some kind of thing, and you're like, all you're doing is showing us that you're buying your wife a $60,000 SUV, and you're putting a new roof on your house, and you're buying a new thing. It's like, you're either in organized crime. I mean, you're living out in the middle of nowhere. You're a plumber by trade, you were, but you know. So it's like possibility you might be getting some side plumbing jobs, but you always seem to be around doing crap around the house. Well, believe me, plumbers aren't aren't spending that kind of money, $1 million a year. You're a YouTube millionaire. These clowns. Anyway, YouTube. So when you turn it on, and there you see all these little title cards like the one that's on the screen right now. Mine. Which isn't clickbait or anything. It's just art. And so there's all this disaster, and it's all like climate change, the floods in Europe, the floods in China, sudden, floods here, fires in California, and all this is attributed to we're beyond a tipping point, or it's too late now. It's all because of CO2, right? And like everything's because of CO2. Hurricanes, like as if we've never had a hurricane. Or like last winter, I said this before. There was a nor'easter, and they were saying, well, this is because of CO2. And then, and it's funny, how it is. It's like almost the algorithm is on to me somehow in some way. One of the things I saw last night come up was like the blizzard of 78, right? And it was basically some video footage of 78, how we had this ridiculous nor'easter and people were in. And I've talked about it because I lived through that as a child. Young guy. And we used to have a lot of them growing up as a kid. In the 60s, it used to snow like crazy. Nor'easters are commonplace, right? And like I say, there have always been hurricanes down in the Gulf in Florida. It's just that nobody lived there that in those days, in most of those areas. That was just swampland. You could buy it. You could spend $500 or $1,000 and get like acres and acres of land down there. That's why Disney put his Disney World down there, because he bought the land for nothing, right? So, when they were having tropical storms and hurricanes down in Florida prior to Disney World and the overgrowth of all of these senior citizen villages along the Gulf Coast and stuff like that, nobody even knew those things happened. The people who lived there, if they were on the coast, they knew. But I mean, if they were people just living like farmers and stuff who lived there, orange growers and stuff, it was like, it's raining pretty hard. And it never made it to the national news because nobody was reporting it. It might have made it to the local Miami or Tampa station as Tampa started to grow, become a metropolis. But, people, this is the thing. It's like everybody sees perspective, of existence and everything that's going on. It's from their own perspective, their lifespan, right? What, them and their parents. And because they don't appreciate or ask their grandparents things, like I said, I've seen one of those one of those DNA things, or one of those things that you can do where you could find your heritage, whatever it's called. You pay them money and they make your chart to show like where you, who your ancestors were, right? And in the commercial, They actually had, I mean, I couldn't believe this stuff. This is insanity. They actually had, one of the women was saying, and I couldn't believe I found out that my grandmother actually lived right here. This was like somebody like up in New York or something. Hey, it was total acting, you know. And it's a place I used to walk by every day, and I had no idea that that was my grandmother's house. And I'm going like, how could you not know that that's who your you know? It's like growing up, I knew where my father was born, right? Where they lived. I know, like, they had like two, like the family homestead, like the two houses they had, different houses. And as I got older, you know, we used to have like family reunion type of things. And people used to bring in these photos of people from like the so-called old country, you know. So I've got them laying around here somewhere because, you know, someone had made, taking these things and put them in a copier enlargement. And so they're like, you know, like suitable for framing size of like people going back into the 1800s and stuff like that. Not here in the U.S. because we, you know, basically my current family, as far as I know, you know, they didn't get here till the late 1800s. I talked about that yesterday. So I have no connection whatsoever, like most Americans, to slavery or the Civil War or any of that crap. It's like those people got to get that through their head. You know, the people, it's the people like the Clintons or the people who, the ruling elitist or the Mayflower set. Those are the ones that have been around and enslaving people. J.P. Morgan type of thing, you know. These companies and these, you know, families that have been around here since then who profited on that. Not your average run-of-the-mill person that just happened to have some European heritage in them. But anyway, so to make a long story longer, all you see on their title cards, and you know, from ABC News, World News Tonight, and they've got their title card, and it's like flooding in Europe, and you know, worst, you know. But the funniest ones are the ones where they say this was the storm of a century, or this is 100-year flood, and they actually put it in there, and they're so functionally illiterate, okay, that they don't even realize that they're busting their own argument within the piece that they're making. Well, if this is a storm that only comes once every 100 years, and it came 100 years ago, then that means it has nothing to do with modern CO2. Do you see? It's like people forget that there was the Dust Bowl and the droughts. And it's the same with those fires and stuff. That's natural occurrences. It's just that people didn't have chateaus in these areas. You know, people don't understand that, you know, where, you know, what the world was look like. You have to talk to an American Indian. And yes, most Indians, every Indian I encountered referred to himself as an Indian, not a Native American. But you've got to talk to an Indian and ask them, because they pass down stories, talk to one another, you know. When I used to live out west, I encountered, in fact, I knew somebody who was actually part Cherokee or something. I forget what it was. But, you know, you have to talk to those people, and they have a heritage, you know, and they know, you know, unlike people today, like that woman who, on that whatever thing it was, that's trying to, you know, find her and go, I didn't even realize that my grandmother lived in this house. You mean you never talked to your grandparents? Right? I mean, more than like what? Seeing them at some point or whatever? Your mother never told you? You know, your grandmother used to live over on, you know, Delancey Street or something. Really weird stuff. But what I was trying to get to, and this is, you know, it's taken forever to get to it, but it's a free flow of consciousness show. So we go wherever we go. And I'm sweating. And one of these things just fell off the bottom. The metal clip fell off of this one. I've had this thing for a long time. This 99 logo thing. It was sitting in something I had upstairs. So it would make sense that the glue would have dried out. But anyway, it's over. It's like 20 years old. First time I put it on. So anyway, 100-year storm, 100-year flood. The worst fires in 30 years or 100 years. Or the worst fires, you know, they say. And like, how do you know, colonial man? You know, this is some 30-year-old reporter saying, these are the California's worst fires. How do you know? In fact, California, you know, remember Lewis and Clark and some of those expeditions and stuff? The white man hadn't discovered, you know, didn't even know California, what exactly was out there, Northern California or the Pacific Northwest. All right? You know, the 13 colonies didn't, you know, basically were on this side of the Mississippi. I mean, you know, do you understand the absurdity of this, is what I'm trying to get across? You know, these people talk as if they know. And that's what I'm saying. I hate matter of factual stuff. It's like these scientists or that Friedman guy I was trying to talk about. You know, they present these things and they don't allow, and then someone starts talking about some possibilities or some alternative things that goes against their ideologies. And then they pretend they're scientists, right? You know, which is supposed to be empirical data, you know, experiment, open for discussion, argument, you know, alternative ideas, prove that theory, right? Experiment, right? But instead, they're all ideologues and it's scientism. And so you got this 30-year-old girl who was hired to be a reporter because she's got big breasts and got a hot face, you know, and a face, one of those faces that look good on camera, right? That look, right? Yeah. The Barbie doll. And then they pretend as if like all that stuff doesn't matter. And then they're going and they're supporting some like, you know, weirdos or something like that. But like on the media themselves, all their like anchors and key people are all like whatever, except that one channel that has the $20 million, you know, guy pretending to be a man or whatever. You know, whatever, a cable channel, right? I still say that, you know, so-and-so, you know, anyway. They're hypocrites is what they are. So within their talks themselves, they basically contradict themselves. You know. But anyway, so they're showing all this stuff. And here's my problem beyond the point that they're hypocrites and that they have no knowledge of history or the past. Because they only see what they know. Some of them don't even know much about their parents. You know, because they're latchkey kids, you know. Half the people are divorced, you know, grew up in divorce, split at a young age. So it's like they spent half the time with daddy, who was like taking them, trying to placate, and give them whatever they needed. One up mommy, and mommy was doing it. Weekend, you know, weekend here, weekend there. What a life for kids, you know. It's as bad as the people who get these women at the moment they get off of maternity leave, they throw the kid in some infant care. preschool. They're raised by the nanny state. Don't have a kid if it's going to be, what are you having kids for? To have it raised by the nanny state and indoctrinated to become a soy boy or whatever you got now? So anyway, so you glance at this, it's in your face, even on YouTube. Like I say, I cut the cord to the cable so I don't have to worry about watching that. And so I'm looking, and here's all these reports, flood of the century, worse this, worse that. But they have no evidence, right? They literally have no evidence of any of this stuff that they're presenting. It's all there. It's like Al Gore was totally disproven. Like, we went over that before. I forget how many years ago, 12 years ago, something like that. 15 years ago, I don't know. It was over a decade ago. It was totally disproven, most of the stuff he presented in his movies, right? And he's still flying around in private jets, being a complete hypocrite as well. But then they go on and they talk about these things, but people who've been around, who've lived, or who talk to their parents and grandparents or great-grandparents, right, will hear a completely different story. And remember, the camera wasn't created with the smartphone, you morons, right? Prior to Instagram and Facebook. Oh, Facebook. Man, what a waste of time. Well, prior to all that crap, there used to be a thing called a camera. And there are we've got photos of Abe frickin' Lincoln. In fact, I got to bring this up because I haven't done it in a while. Let's see. What is this one? That was a U.S. Yeah. All right. Let me I think if I put in Abe, it should come up. I know. It's Apple computer, so I'll have 10,000 things. You have Apple. If I wanted to get a computer like I used to have in the 70s, or not the 70s, the 90s. Yeah, well, probably the 70s. Let's see if I can find the original Abe. I found the picture I want, but it's like, it was from a title card. I actually used it on a title card once. I wanted to see if I have one that doesn't have the title on it. Where is it? I just did find the thing, Abe Lincoln Vampire Hunter. There was some movie they made one time. Okay, Abe, no, unfortunately I've got to bring up, this is fine because this is apropos of like my show. So let's get rid of the title card. Let's put up the news. And I mean, having that on there, this is almost perfect. It's actually better than my original title card. You don't know what you don't know. That's Abe Lincoln without a beard. Okay? Abraham Lincoln, the Civil War president. Okay? That was taken with a camera. That's him without a beard. All right? So the photo, photo wasn't invented by, the iPhone and the smartphone, and it just didn't come along. And you on your Facebook and Twitter and whatever, that wasn't the beginning of photographs, you morons. So, the camera. Motion pictures go back, right? Not long after the camera, they started to put pictures in motions, and turn it in the early days. They used to turn a crank to create what would be called a motion picture. That's how the term came to be, right? They put a series of photos together, and it was a motion picture. Now you just hear movie and photo or pic or something, right? Anyway, the camera's been around for a long time. So these things have been, there have been people with the cameras. And when they sent these guys like the Lewis and Clark types who were going out west, remember the 13 original colonies, man, was just like, that's the coast, that's the East Coast crap, right? So these people have no idea what was happening in the Midwest, Southwest, Northwest, California and stuff. Okay? You know, that was like Mexican territory and stuff, you know, with Spanish-American wars and stuff, you know. Even Louisiana, which we ended up with the Louisiana Purchase. Do you remember that? Did they teach you that? But that, you know, we had the French, you know, wars with France. Everybody wanted a piece of the U.S. of A. Okay? What is now the U.S. of A. North America. Well, anyway, you could go back and, you know, with digital technology now, and you could find this stuff. That's the beauty of YouTube. You could find people that have taken, you know, there were people who had cameras and movie cameras, you know, in the early part of the last century. And they had taken pictures. I was caught up in them once because I watched one, and then they, in my recommended list, a whole series of them were like, you know, different ones were popping up in my recommended list. I wasn't even searching for them. And it was stuff like, here's Paris, you know, colorized and restored, you know, because with this digital processes we have now, you know, computerized, we could basically take these images and colorize and clean them up. Like if you look at this picture of Abe, all right, I'll try to make it even a little bit bigger. You see all that scruffy stuff in the background, and it's grainy, and, you know, that's because it's an old photo. But now, even in Photoshop, you know, and I've often done it over the years, you can manually clean that stuff up with Photoshop, and sometimes now they have filters and different things that will help. But there are algorithms, you know, for movies and photos and colorization that are just outrageous. So you could see France, you know, 100-some years ago, you know, or New York City, what it was like. And, you know, cameras weren't cheap. And at that point, cameras usually were used for to commemorate some kind of event. I mean, they used to do some morbid things, like they would take death photos. You know, that was a common thing. You've seen that in some Westerns sometimes, you know, people taking a picture of these people in the coffins and stuff. It's kind of stuff. But that was a real thing. But like I say, here's Abe Lincoln. It's a photo of him. This is no joke. This isn't like, right? And I bet you if you showed this picture, you know, minus my morning show, You Don't Know What You Don't Know, which, by the way, the shirt is available at TonyCaravanLive.com. Get it. Right? Because that's what this is all about. You don't know what you don't know. If you went on the street with a picture of Abe Lincoln, say 8x10, you know, on a glossy print, and you stood on a street corner, right? And you just, or a college campus, and you just asked passersby, who is this? And when was it taken? Right? I bet you'd be lucky if you'd find one person that would know that was Abe Lincoln. And even and let alone, you know, well, if they knew it was Abe Lincoln, they'd know when it would have to have been taken. But you understand that. People don't know what they don't know. And so how do these people say, how does some 30-year-old blonde with a hairdo on ABC World News or CBS or PBS stand there with a straight face smiling and like flipping her hair before she gets on camera and saying to the cameraman, her producer, whatever, how do I look? How do I look? Right? The showbiz of the news, right? And going, and this is the worst California fire in history. Hey, Blondie, you're 30 years old. In maybe your history, you don't know. George Washington didn't even know what was going on in California. Okay? Ben Franklin didn't know. Okay? And certainly your ancestors, who were probably still in Europe at the time, didn't know. I mean, give me a break. There are trees that need to burn in order for the next generation of trees to grow. I mean, it's part of the process of the forest. Clears out the brush, clears out the trees. The new seedlings come up now because the canopy is burned out. The sun gets down to the ground. These seeds, I guess some seeds actually, the fire actually, makes them work. You say, well, what are you talking about? You don't know. Well, I don't exactly know what I'm talking about, but I know this much. Okay, let me take Abe off for a second. I'm a frickin' gardener. I plant seeds all the time. So I come across this stuff every now and then. And if I wanted to waste some time, I could dig it out. But I know for sure about the canopy and about the fires. It's a natural thing for the forest. Otherwise, you would just have a bunch of old trees, old tree growth, and there would never be any new trees to replace them. And the whole process of the forest wouldn't look like a forest. It would be some kind of like, spotty thing that, until the trees all fell down. But even if they fell down, they would be covered in the ground. And in other words, you wouldn't have these rolling hills and this beauty that you see. That's because of forest fires. We live on this planet. It's their planet. Like I say, when you look at this planet, between aquatic life and the forests, all right, the plants, as well, the flora in general, but trees more specifically, we're on this is their planet. And they breathe CO2, by the way. Okay? Some could argue that human beings only exist. You want to take a really weird, view of things? That human beings only exist to exhale CO2 and to crap and then eventually decay and become fertilizer for the trees and the plants. And all this brain, this overthink that we're doing, right? And all we are is serving the trees. You want to really put yourself in humble yourself and put yourself in perspective. Now, I'm not saying that's so necessarily, but it is kind of true. All right? It's kind of true. But this girl, or guy, it was like the guy who was talking about the nor'easter. This is because of CO2, and we'll be seeing more, like this is a bad nor'easter. I don't know, like last year. That wasn't that bad, man. And then you could go on YouTube, and there was somebody with a camera back in 78 that has all this film footage of the blizzard of 78. And this was a guy this past winter, and I think it was after January. So in 2021 saying, like as if this was some bad nor'easter. What is he talking about? It wasn't even that bad. We've had way worse storms back in the 70s. And going back further. And beyond that point, who knows, man? But the camera has been around and has basically documented. There are movies of the Dust Bowl of the 30s. There are these classic Pulitzer-type prize-winning photos of these people, who lost everything and ended up moving west because of the drought in the 30s. And it just devastated the Midwest and the crops. People talk, we're going to have problems with crops and all. It's like, been there, done that, about 90 years ago. And yes, there are countless photos in the Library of Congress, if you don't believe me. This is, I mean, the absurdity absurd. You know? For crying out loud, you know? I just got to play it one more time.
This is insane. This is insane.
Yeah. Some woman with a hairdo, a face, talking head on TV, right? This is the worst in history. You have no idea. You don't know what you don't know. Storms are going to get worse. These are bad storms. This storm up in... Yeah, they're tragic. Whenever there's a storm, a flood, a fire, it's a tragedy for people. Who isn't acknowledging that? You know, we just had like crazy rains and weather here. And my frickin' roof is leaking, man. And I had to go to the ER because I had some kind of, I don't know what it is, some vertigo, ear problem, or a virus in my frickin' brain. And my head's going to, you know, this is going to be Scanner's movie, you know, during this broadcast. You know, and on top of having all that bullshit go on with me, and I had a cancer operation 1.5 years ago, I've got like buckets of shit up in my attic to keep the rain from coming in, and I got to deal with worrying about that because there's a storm and it's blowing shit all over the place, and I got a crazy neighbor, and if my trees grow anymore because all this rain, they're growing on her property, and she's freaking out because she's like a witch, and you know, and all this stuff. Face it, it's nature, man. It happens. You know, and one of the side things of nature doing that is this. Plenty. So out of all that aggravation and all this crazy rains and all this stuff and a freaking neighbor freaking out because my tree's growing over the fence line, it's like, look, in another 2 months, all the leaves will be off the tree. I'll be able to hopefully be in better position. I'll get on a frickin', you know, get the choppers out, chop the limbs. Nothing will be on your side. And the fall winds blow. Those leaves will be blown. You won't even have to rake them up. The leaves are going to be blown out. I never even see where the leaves go because we get strong winds in the fall. But no, she's got to freak out. But look at this picture here. That's just yesterday. That was just me yesterday, just picking a few things before I came in the house. It was really hot and out. I wanted to sit outside longer. But it was just so hot and humid. You know, it's summertime. That's why I'm dressed the way I am. It's freaking summertime. It's hotter than hell in here. 5:39 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time in the former United States, here on the Mid-Atlantic states, about an hour from one of the entrances to the Northern Appalachian Trail, in case you're wondering where I am. But look at that plenty. And that all comes from CO2 too, by the way. You know, so, you know, look. There were cameras. There were movie cameras. All right? And these people did it. That's Abraham Lincoln before he had a frickin' beard and the top hat. Right? He was actually a dashing looking guy. You know? I must say so myself. Hey, Abe, I didn't realize you were such a dashing gentleman. But the thing about it is, these 30-year-olds or even 40-year-olds, what are they're saying? This is the worst in history. But like I say, worse than that or funnier than that is when they say it's the storm of the century or this is the worst flood we've had that they've experienced in 100 years. Well, doesn't that by definition mean that it happened 100 years ago? You know, before, you know, this so-called man-made thing. I mean, I told you, I put up that other thing, you know, of course, you know, let's not forget no fun allowed. I'm not going to get rid of that. But let's see if I have an extra unused space here. Which one is this? Climate. I just want to give you some images. Climate. Mug, space video, garden. Image of the day. We don't need, let's just say, no fun allowed. We went through that. I'm going to replace that what was I going to replace it with? Something else that was going to show you that had to do with, oh, I know now. Let me go, properties. Okay. Time. I'm staring at a search. I'm searching through some of my previous, what I would call daily slides, previous slides, because I had it was included in one of our earlier episodes, just like the Abe was. And I just want to show you this because it's key. So just bear with me. What the heck? It's somewhere in here. What would I have called it? Did I call it? It's a Time magazine cover. People who've watched this show before know what I'm talking about, but I don't think it's listed under Time. So it would be. Oh, come on. I won't waste much of your time, but I'm gonna try to find this within the next 60 seconds. Let's give myself about that time. Frozen Earth. No, that's not it. Though, we're in interglacial period right now, by the way, so that the natural, the Earth should freeze over and will freeze over again. Big freeze. Here it is. I found it. Thank God. Okay. Let's get rid of this. Call this image of the day. This is Time magazine cover. December 3rd, 1973. Okay. All right. And for those of you who are too young to know, that's a cartoon image of Archie Bunker, who was like All in the Family was the #1 show. Or if it wasn't #1, I think MASH was going on too. So between MASH and Archie Bunker, those were the shows of that era, right? More or less. And so they've got Archie Bunker freezing on his chair, right? And there's this climate change thing in his hand, like this chart. This is Time magazine when Time magazine actually was respected, right? And it's talking about the big freeze, and this article was like, and the story at that time was, is global, is the Earth headed for another ice age? 1973. That means if you're in your 40s, right, you weren't even born, all right, when this cover came out. And we were having like nor'easters and all this kind of stuff was going on then. And they were talking about, are we heading for a new ice age? There was somebody watching and they left because this probably totally freaked them out. That was the cognitive dissonance, confronted with like too much facts, right? That it's like totally destroying their narrative, their indoctrination. You see? People don't like guys like me because I was around and I have all the documents. I have the pictures because I'm a pop culture guy. So I have been chronicling this and I've been involved in these kinds of things forever. All right? So back then it was the big freeze. And these people are like, this nor'easter is because of CO2. Get a life, man. Look on YouTube for the blizzard of 78. And how about the Johnstown Floods? Johnstown Floods. Around I think it was like the last one was in 77, like Agnes, Hurricane Agnes or something like that. I don't remember that exactly. Okay? But Hurricane Agnes, all right, let's get back to Abe. This is like, this is the U.S. flooding. And this is a city in the U.S., an industrial city that flooded 3 times. Now here's the real kicker on this one. You ready for this? In fact, I may have to look it up to get the exact dates. I'm going to look this up because this is very important since I'm doing this show. When were the Johnstown Floods plural? All right. May 31st, 1889 was the first Johnstown flood. What caused the Johnstown flood of 1977? Heavy rains. All right, along with the weakened dam. But that's what they said in China. All right. Killing nearly 2,000 people in only 10 minutes, nearly a century later. Pennsylvania make headlines across the state earlier. In other words, the Johnstown, Ohio River flood of 1937. Johnstown flood flooded again in 1936, 1977, and in 1889. And there's a place there because I used to have an ad agency in Johnstown that you can go to the Johnstown Museum, okay? Flood Museum. All right. And let me show you, how insane it was. I hate having to, the problem with a free flow of consciousness show is that you are constantly interrupting yourself. So I'm going to take what's called climate. What do I have for climate? Oh yeah, we don't need that. So climate would be Johnstown flood. So let me take climate properties, browse, Johnstown debris. Okay. Climate. I'm going to get rid of Abe for a second. Because the Abe thing is important, but, this actually, in a sense, supersedes Abe even. This is the damage. See, they had a photo, right? And you could see these, steel in the background, these steel plants. But look at that. Look what the flood did. This basically turned all the city, mostly everything, into toothpicks. And this is all under flood water. This is floating along the river or whatever you want to call it. Let me just see here. So you follow what I'm saying? 1889, 37, 77. People just don't get this stuff, man. And it's like a flow of consciousness. So I wasn't even thinking about this stuff until it just happened to, get across. And like I say, people will tune in and then they'll tune out because it freaks them out. They don't want to hear it. They don't want to see evidence of that. So yeah. How dare you? How dare you? Like that, how do these people, they talk with such certainty, matter of fact. CO2, the IPCC, NASA's going under, Ben Davidson from Suspicious Observers is in an ongoing matter of factual argument with NASA that's put out some unsubstantiated, climate nonsense. And, and he's definitely out-fact them, and they're just like, whatever. And, like I say, the IPC is like the FDA, they've been caught red-handed, so many times that they have no credibility whatsoever. What do you mean the FDA has no credibility? I'll say it for the umpteenth time. Turn on your TV, because you're probably going to watch some morning show. And what are you going to see? An ad for a pharmaceutical drug, right? Okay. But what else are you going to see? Well, you're going to see some commercials for cars because basically, TV, news people are car salesmen. That's what they are. What else are you going to see? The law firm of such and such and such and such. If you use this drug, right, and you suffered from such and such and such and such, contact the law firm of blah, 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 and blah, 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 and you will be eligible for compensation. And you see a new one of these. So you see an ad for a drug, this year, and then you see a suit for it next year. And that's the FDA's been doing these things, these law firm things, since I was a kid, they've been on commercials. So in other words, I don't know what the percentage is, if it's half or whatever. But all I know is one thing, the FDA has no credibility because they keep approving these things. It's the same with these all kinds of other things that are, cause problems and, obesity problems and type 2 diabetes and all this stuff. All these foods and stuff are on the market and they've been proven to it's like the sugar substitutes and stuff. They put in these no-cal, low-cal drinks and stuff like that. And they're basically things that, the body treats it as if it's sugar anyway, so people end up gaining weight. People drinking Diet Colas end up being fatter than people drinking. You're better off to just drink a regular old soda, sugar soda. But sugar's no good for you. But neither are sugar substitutes. So, yeah, this is just a comical but seriously sad thing because people are freaked out and they're messing with people's health and livelihood and mental health. Because the problem right now, like I say, it's a mad world. People are going frickin' crazy. Like, why don't you just cure this thing? There should be a moratorium. They say the government has, like when they wanted to make, what were they called? The respirators, not respirators, the thing, oxygen machines, whatever the hell they called. That whole circus last year, press conferences and stuff. We've got so many of these things that we're going to give them to our allies too. No one will be, not be denied having one of, being put on one of these machines, which anybody who was on those machines usually meant you were going to die. But they use this act, some kind of, like the government act like they did during World War II, where they just basically took over factories and said, you have to make this thing, right? Forget about making cars. You got to make, Jeeps for the war effort. Forget about making something else. You got to make uniforms for our troops. Okay. So they used that, thing last year to make all these things, right? But they didn't go to big tech, right? They didn't go to big tech and say, "Hey, here's the deal. You guys figure out. We want a frickin' cure for this. I want a pill." I'm not talking about big pharma. You can't trust big pharma. Remember, that's like the FDA, game there. Big pharma puts out a drug, and then then there's some lawsuit about that drug a year or two later. Okay, you can't trust big pharma. They're in it for the business. They make hundreds of billions of dollars. You can't trust them. All right? But you got all these minds at big tech, and you say, okay, you're going to take a moratorium on AI and algorithms and all your little, nonsensical crap that you're messing around with. All right? And you guys are going to come up with a thing, and not something you put in the old thing there, because you can't do that, because those things that stuff is like, I don't want a yearly thing that you have to take all the time or keep taking for the rest of your life. No, I want you guys to have a pill. Come up with a pill or a potion. Put your brilliant minds to it instead of worrying out how to add another camera to an iPhone or to make people be able to have a FaceTime party and listen to music and watch a movie together. Because that's a problem with this country. All the minds, all the people who have these jobs and this availability to this technology and stuff are all focused on making games, movies, right? Entertainment and little devices that people could just waste away their day on, right? So why didn't they go to them and say, look, let's nip this thing in the bud. You got 6 months to come up with a freaking pill. Like that guy in India had some kind of drops. I don't know what he was using, if it was neem or something weird like that. Nobody knows, because they stopped him after, so-called 20 million people or 20,000 people in a village. That's a story. We could check that out on YouTube if it's still available. But they basically confiscated whatever herb he was using. But it was almost, it was right out of a New Testament biblical story. These guys were coming in, they were dropping people off in ambulances. They're laying down. This guy'd come along, put a couple drops of this, herb concoction in their nose, and they'd sit up, and then they'd be walking, and then they'd be basically dancing around like Lazarus raised from the dead. That was weird. There's a video about that. And it's been covered on foreign news reports. It's like I saw an interview of a South Korean doctor, on a South Korean news, but there were subtitles. See, because in the U.S., and there must be something about subtitles. I probably shouldn't be saying this because Google's probably already or YouTube's are probably already on it. But there's something about some of these subtitled things that, they say stuff that the average person, if you say it, they would just block your video. But, you watch these reports and there's subtitles there, and what they're saying is mind-blowing. Completely opposite of the narrative that we're being sold. But like I say, I don't know. Who knows? You investigate that stuff yourself. So yeah, Honest Abe, so here's a picture of Abraham Lincoln. So don't you sit there with some modern camera equipment and try to tell me, that this is the worst fire, worst flood, worst storm ever. All right? Because you don't know. You weren't alive, right? In December 3rd or whatever. I think it's a 3rd. It's kind of blurry. 1973. Time magazine cost 50 cents back then. Archie Bunker, right? See, that was the thing they were pushing back then, their little fear-mongering, right? A photograph of Abraham Lincoln without a beard. Honest Abe. Yeah, it's pretty hilarious, but it's not. You see? It's not funny. You don't know what you don't know. So how do these people get off trying to just present this thing? UN IPC latest report warns it may be even too late. AOC, some kid, she's a kid. She's like 30-something, right? I'm sorry, She doesn't know. And she has no background in any of this stuff. Climate science, Doesn't know anything. She doesn't understand the sun, right? Magnetism, the Earth's magnetic field, cosmic rays, UVB rays, how magnetic field of the Earth is weakening and that allows more things in. She probably doesn't even understand the ozone layer, right? That was a big thing back then, because people were using aerosols, and so we had a hole. In fact, I don't think it's still open over top of Antarctica. Like we still have a hole, ozone hole. It still hasn't closed up yet, I don't believe, completely. But they don't know this stuff. They weren't around. They weren't born. And they talk matter of factually, like, oh, we're all going to, AOC was the one, we're all going to die in 10 years. That was 8 years ago or something like that, or 2 or 3 years ago. So it's like, oh, we're going to, so now, according to her, we've got like 7 years. It's like, no, you don't understand. I showed you the Johnstown Flood. It flooded 3 times. The first time was 1889. Okay? Then it was in the 30s. All right, and then in 77. And in 73, they were talking about the Great Freeze. Because everything was cold. And if you look at a lot of the climate reports and the graphs and stuff, they don't go back before like the 1960 or into the 50s, because there was the, like I said, the Dust Bowl era in the 30s and stuff. Or I guess I often talk about that Humphrey Bogart movie that took place during a hurricane, Key Largo. I forget whenever that was made in the 40s or something like that. Or maybe, maybe before. So it's like these people don't know. They have no but they talk matter of factual. This is the in history. Like, forget it, man. There's photos. Go to the Library of Congress. It's a pain in the ass, really, to do it. It used to be a lot easier. You used to just be able to go through it. But they've made it more difficult because it's as if they don't want you to find the truth. So now it's really hard. It's harder to search the archives online at the Library of Congress. And some of the stuff that used to just be simply there it's not. It's the same with what they did with Wikipedia. Wikipedia changes like the weather. If there's something on there that somebody quotes that they found on Wikipedia that supports, goes against the mainstream story, the next time you got to take an instant screen capture of it. That's the secret with but Wikipedia, they're probably so on that it's probably already too late. But if you ever find something on Wikipedia that backs up, something like I'm saying here, take a screen capture of it, because if it makes it to the news, they're going to change it on Wikipedia. I've seen that happen countless times, and they'll yank a photo, right? Because they don't want people to know, They just don't want people to know because it goes against their narrative, and they're using this fear narrative. This is like, when the humans are in a state of fear, okay, when people are like unsettled and stuff, they're more susceptible to the power of suggestion, programming, or brainwashing is what it really is. Propaganda. When people are in an unsettled state. And they'll do anything or accept anything to be, calm. You see that, people don't want, they don't want it. And that's why people like this show, there's nobody watching now. But some people will tune in and then they'll tune out because once they're confronted with something, they'll go like, that can't be true. That can't be true. And, and then I show a picture that proves it, right? And then they're like, no, that's impossible. Steve Jobs invented the camera, or something. I mean, I don't know. Or people think like the camera started with the Polaroid or something in the 60s or something. Or the Brownie cameras used to be like a square box in the late 50s. I remember growing up, there was one still in our house. My parents had a movie camera and cameras. My mom was a photo album type of person, and we took home movies. I converted some of my home movies, and I gave them to my siblings and my family. I converted them and put them on, montage or whatever you want to call it. I put a bunch of them together and onto a DVD, I don't know, about 10 or 15 years ago, and sent them out to everybody. But, it was amazing. They were taking home movies every year and whenever there would be a big snowfall. And some of them, were like when we were just little pups. And there were pictures of us like, the snow where, if they put us down, we would have been buried in snow. So I've seen it not only firsthand through family home movies and seen, and lived through, these various decades. But like this picture of Abe that I'm keeping up for right now, it's like, come on, man. The camera's been around a long time, and that's what people used to do with cameras and with movie cameras. They would take historical pictures, or if there was a major thing, just like I said, like this, let's go back to it, This flood, this is in the U.S. of A. This isn't Germany. You saw those like things in Germany and China and stuff. They weren't even this bad. This happened like 3-4 times in like a certain area, like from the Ohio Valley into Johnstown, right? Starting in 1889, one time in the 30s, another time in the early part of the century, and then in 77, right? I was alive, I'm not that young a guy, I don't know what I look like. It's hard to say. I can't, it's hard to judge your own self. But I was alive in the 70s, okay? And we had that, at the same time that there was the Johnstown flood, the power went out for almost a week where I used to live because that storm was so bad. No CO, people weren't talking about CO2 or anything like that then. All right. They were saying that the time cover I just showed you, they were saying somebody tuning in late or something, they were saying the big freeze. We're heading for a new ice age in 73. In 77, you had the Johnstown flood. All right. There's Honest Dave. Somebody took a picture of him. That wasn't with an iPhone or a smartphone. That was with a camera. Okay? I just do something here. My computer's getting hot. Yeah. Just checking. Yeah, so, come on. There's, Abe in the 1860s. You don't know what you don't know. It was taken with a camera. So 40 years from 60, that's, add on 120. Right? It's 160 years ago. Think about that. That's how long, that's how approximately how old that picture is. It's about 160 years old. 160 years old. Right? This picture of, Archie Bunker from the 70s, that's almost 50 years ago. When they were talking, we're heading for a new ice age. 50 years ago. And, this cover, 4 years later after this cover, we had, if I get my mouse to work, it's sticking. We had the Johnstown Flood. Yeah, somebody tuned in. They saw that and it scared the crap out of them. And so we had a flood here worse than Germany, worse than China. Thousands of people died. Thousands. 2,000 people died in 10 minutes when one of those floods hit. 2,000 people died in 10 minutes in the U.S. of A. Okay? Imagine that. You can't. And you think these blondes, fixing their hairdo with the producer saying, "Oh, these are the worst fires in history. Like, how do you know? How would you even know? How would you dare even say that statement? How do you even do you call yourself a journalist? You work for a news organization? History. You can't even say American history or colonial history. We weren't even there. Okay? We weren't in California. Right? A lot of the West wasn't even opened. All right? I mean, I think Lincoln was involved in that. You know, I mean, that's what I was trying to check before, but my thing was hitting up. Let me just see here a second. Lincoln... I'm trying to think how Lincoln West, let's see, expeditions. Lewis and Clark. (1804) was Lewis and Clark. When did Lewis and Clark discover Nebraska? 1804. Well, that's good. Okay. So that's even worse yet. That's like over 200 years ago. They just were at Nebraska. I don't know, man. People just, yeah, it's so hot in here. It's crazy. My CPU is just like, this computer's getting hot. Yeah, so anyway, that's that, you know, sometimes you just got to get into this. Like, you know, I like being able to pull up these images and to demonstrate to people how out of whack and crazy they are. And for those wondering, I might as well give this before I forget. The 99 stands for 99 bananas. It's a drink. When I used to be in the magazine business and have dining and entertainment magazines, I used to get all this swag from all the liquor companies and beer companies. And one time they gave me this, and I recently found it. I never wore it. 99. It's like metal. It's pretty hard. 99 bananas. Oh man, that stuff is the stuff. They have different flavors now, but 99 bananas. Oh man, a shot of that. It tastes like, when you first take the shot, it tastes like bananas. It's like, okay, banana. But it's like, then it's like, oh, it's like, you know, grain alcohol. Yeah. I don't do that stuff anymore. So the fact of the matter is, just to like, you know, kind of pull all this babble together. You know, before most of these people who are on, most of the talking heads and reporters, so-called reporters, were even born. You know, in those days, we were having blizzards. We were having storm of the centuries back in the, you know, in the 70s. Okay? In the 60s, there were nor'easters. All right? There were, you know, Florida wasn't developed. Okay? Wasn't developed. The whole concept of Disney World and stuff like that was Walt Disney trying to create. We used to have worlds. I think the last World's Fair. They used to have these things called the World's Fair every year, which was like science and the future, like, you know, what the future is going to be like. My parents went to one of them in New York in the 60s, I believe. You know, because I say they used to take pictures and stuff. They were into that kind of stuff. And Walt Disney, he wanted to build a place that was like the World's Fair all the time. And that's what Epcot Center kind of was, you know, science in the future. At least it was. I went to Epcot Center once a long time ago, real long time ago, like 35 years ago or something like that. I forget how long ago it was. And you know, and that was like the World's Fair. And what I'm getting at is that Florida, prior to, you know, back in the 60s and in the 50s and before that time, was just swampland for the most part. I mean, you had people living there, and you had Miami, you know, in the 60s, Miami, you know, you could see movies about the mobsters going to Miami and stuff. So you had development in certain areas. But like most of the Gulf Coast and most of those areas, they were sparsely populated. It wasn't anything like today. It wasn't like the place where all the people from New York and New Jersey went down and retired, all the rich folks, right? They're still going down there now. And there was no Orlando, megalopolis built around Disney World and Universal. Then the Universal Studios have a place down there now or something like that too. You know, that stuff was just swampland, man. Disney bought that for like probably $1 an acre or something like that. Like I've told this before, you used to see in the back of the magazines, buy land in Florida. It used to be, you know, you could have bought like 100 acres for $500 or something. You know? Anyway, so don't tell me like, okay, so you even know hurricanes. Because the Gulf in Florida was sparsely populated. You didn't have those populations, just like other areas. You know? And the same with California and these forest fires and stuff. You didn't have developments in these forests. People didn't know if a tree falls in a forest and does it make a noise and nobody's there, does it make a noise, right? The classic, mind game. Well, the fact of the matter, if there's a forest fire in a forest and nobody lives nearby, does anybody know? No, they don't. So prior to these developments, and these young kids come out and a 30 years old, 40-year-old reporter, you know, is considered like a senior reporter or news anchor. They weren't even born, or they were toddlers in the 70s when we were having nor'easters that would like drive them crazy. And this year they came out and said, oh, this nor'easter's caused by CO2. Like, buddy, you have no idea. That snowstorm we had this year was nothing. I've talked about it before. I remember the snow up. You couldn't see your car. The snow was up to our garage. We couldn't get out the back door, but fortunately we had a porch, a front porch with steps on it. So we were able to get out the front door barely and shovel our way carefully down the stairs. And I must have spent 8 hours as a kid, because as a kid, you're like slave labor for your parents. So it was probably me and my brother or something, trying to dig out the car to even get to it. That's the way it used to snow back then. And they were talking about, are we headed for another ice age in 73? And again, I know this is repetitive, but I have to keep saying it. The Dust Bowl and all the photographs that they have, the movies that were taken of that era, the heat, the intense heat. And now they say this is going to be the hottest year on record. It's like, screw you. Nobody was sitting in the Midwest with like, you know, news organizations taking the temperature, but you know, just look at the pictures. All those farmers, they lost everything. It was they call it the Dust Bowl because the sand was blowing and had taken over, like over the crops, over people's houses. You couldn't get in the doors of people's houses. That's how dry and hot it was. It became a desert in places. right? Desert overtook, these people, these cities, these places. But I'm saying you got the Johnstown flood goes back to 1889. But it happened again in 77, and that picture is just ridiculous. I mean, that is worse than what happened in Germany. This is worse than what happened in Germany. There's water. This is coming down the river, okay? Look at the destruction. 2,000 people were killed. My mouse, I'm sorry about this. My mouse is messed up. Come on. These computers, I'll tell you. That's the other thing, like I say, about tech. The tech we have today is total garbage. Unless you spend, there's like a decent Mac you can get, but it would cost about $14,000. That's what it's like rated at. The MacBook Pros, they cost like in the $2,000s, $2,700. I mean, because you have to have, in order to operate most of the software and stuff you do these days, you need a lot of RAM. They call it DRAM or DRAM, whatever. But they're junk. They're basically junk, overpriced junk, and they last about 2 years. And it's like this computer I'm using now, I don't have the current version of the operating system on it because I can't. This computer won't accept it. So in other words, Dave's saying, you could use your old stuff on it, but unless you buy a new computer, you're screwed. This monitor cost me $1,000. I got a 27-inch Thunderbolt monitor, but it's the original Thunderbolt. It's not Thunderbolt 2, 3, 4, or whatever it is. And I was reading something on the Apple site the other day. This is a flow of consciousness thing. And I was looking to see if I got a new, like a Mac Mini or something, right? Could I connect it to this? And there was something on there. I was looking under tech specs. It said, was talking about you can get buy an outside adapter to get Thunderbolt 2 and to use Thunderbolt 2 or 3 because they're up to like Thunderbolt 3 or 4 or something like that. But nothing about like just Thunderbolt, which would be considered Thunderbolt 1. So in other words, this $1,000 monitor I have, which is beautiful, okay, is basically outdated. And my computer, even if I had $1,000 to buy another, Mac Mini type of thing, because I have 16 gigabytes of DRAM in this thing. It's like a quad processor, and all that stuff. And it's got like a solid state drive in it. So it should have it's got some life left in it, I hope, knock on wood, right? But if I were to buy a new one somehow, I don't know how, nobody buys any stuff, so I'm basically flat broke. But there's no guarantee, even with an adapter, that I'd be able to use it on this monitor. So this $1,000 monitor, it still has probably several years of life left in it, would just become garbage. That's why I say how tech, people don't realize that there's this certain group of people that were just like born, within the past 20 or 30 years. And they think, oh man, this is great, And it's like, well, you don't have no idea, man, what we were doing in the 90s. You don't know. You don't know what you don't know. You don't know that this picture of Abraham Lincoln was taken in, 160 years ago. 160 years ago. No, they didn't have smartphones, right? Those didn't come around until the 2000s. But they've got pictures of the 1889 flood in Johnstown that was worse than what you saw happening in Germany or in Greece or in China, and killed more people. They're not saying that on the news. How come? Right? They're not bringing up that cover of Archie Bunker from 1973. You know, when they were talking about, oh, are we heading for an ice age? No, 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 no. See? The flip-flopping, right? Fear-mongering, jumping to conclusions, talking about this is the worst, some 30-year-old reporter saying this is the worst forest fire in history in California. How would you know? How would you know? We weren't there. You know, and, you know, it wasn't like she was like reporting from an Indian reservation in the West and asking some chief, you know, who has had, you know, through an oral tradition passed down from chief to chief, what went on, right? And who would say, yes, you know, whatever. No, forget about that. When's the last time you even saw anybody on an Indian reservation asking an Indian anything? And I use the word Indian because all the Indians I knew referred to themselves as Indians. Okay, so I'm just saying it, calling it like it is. But no, you don't see anybody asking an Indian about it. This is the worst fire in history. Fires have been happening for ever. It's the natural cycle. It's how forests renew themselves. Okay? All right? CO2 is what trees breathe. CO2 has brought me this yesterday from my garden. That's just one day. Okay? Harvest. Those plants breathe CO2. That's an actual picture from my garden. That was stuff I brought in. I got piles of tomatoes. I've been giving food out like I've got a farmer's market. And I have a house that I pay $200 mortgage, taxes, and insurance. It's a tiny plot of land. It's only 19 feet wide, but it's about 100 feet deep. The yard goes back a ways. And just by chance, it's south facing, so it's good for growing. And we've been getting a lot of rain, which is nice. Bad for my leaky roof, but nice for the garden. But like I say, man, there's photos out there of everything throughout, beyond people's wildest dreams. The camera's been around for a long time, and the motion picture has been around for a long time. And in the early days, they didn't waste it making a TikTok video or some short YouTube short of goofy nonsense or some bullshit politics, meaningless political arguments. They chronicled big events, right? Big events or historical things or the big floods or the big storms or the dust bowls. All of these things that are contrary to the current narrative by the UN, IPCC, NASA, NOAA, and the Weather Channel, and all these network people that are trying to fearmonger people that CO2 is some evil thing, when in fact it is the things that the forests breathe, and that without it we would have no plants. And they are actually seriously talking about trying to dim the sun by putting particulate matter in our atmosphere and stuff like that. I mean, these people are crazy. They've got a whole generation of people brainwashed because they won't show them the photos and the archives that exist in the Library of Congress. I mean, the Library of Congress, I think they're starting to turn into like the Vatican archives, right? We have no access to these ancient books that go back like, thousands of years, that may well tell a complete different history of the world, right? Books that were, ransacked from the Library of Alexandria, before they burned it down twice, right? Stuff in there that, could basically blow your mind, right? Because why else are they hiding it? Does it go against, because it goes against some narrative, right? Why do they change pages on Wikipedia? Because it goes against some narrative, some political or ideological narrative, right? Why is the Library of Congress, changed? It's like harder to find stuff there and everything now because it goes against their narrative. Why is it harder to get FOIA documents? You put in a request for a Freedom of Information Act, right? And they like stomp their feet, and then, and maybe after a year you get something and it's like redacted. Like it's, they actually have the nerve to send you a sheet of paper that someone took a magic marker and it says the only thing you could see is the word to, but who it's to is blacked off. And the word from is still there, but that's blacked off. And then regarding, because if you ask to find something regarding a thing, that might be there, but the entitled thing will say, dear, and then magic marker, and then the entire rest of the page is redacted. It's all black magic markered. And they have the balls to send you that thing. They still haven't released the Kennedy documents. I know that freaks people out when you bring that up, because then they put you into like some, foil hat thing. But the question is, what are they hiding? Oh, we're protecting national security. Well, if you're protecting national security, that means something fishy happened 60 years ago. And what did you do? And it's like that UFO thing. It's like now they're coming out with this, the DOD came out with all that stuff. So in other words, what you're telling us is you made all these people out to be tinfoil hat conspiracy theorists and all that bull that you've been spouting for the past 60 years, right, about UFOs. And now you're coming out and say, oh, yeah, well, we've been looking into it, and the Navy is, and we have photos and video from pilots, and the DOD confirmed it. Well, what about all those people you made out to be lunatics? What about the guy, all those guys who probably their wife divorced them because they thought they were crazy, right? When the guy was actually right. Or vice versa. You know what I mean? Do you understand what's going on? Do you understand the absurdity and what a mad world we live in and how crazy it is? And the significance of this of this Honest Abe picture is that was taken 160 years ago. All right. These are all destroyed buildings. There's dead bodies in there. This is all floating down a river. This is one of the 3 Johnstown floods. Okay? It's way worse than what happened in Germany, China, Greece. All right? 2,000 people in one of those things died within 10 minutes. 10 minutes. And they're saying, "Oh, this is the worst flood of whatever." And this is the world we live in today, right? This is the world we live in today. And people just accept it. They take it. It's crazy, man. It's crazy. So anyway, I don't know. I think this, considering I just approached this as a free flow of consciousness, I mean, I think there was some pretty good eye-openers in this program. Share it, Visit TonyCaravanLive.com and get yourself a shirt that says, "You don't know what you don't know," or "Everything you know is wrong," or "Game over," or get a mug or something like that. Support this program. Share the video, like it, share it somewhere. Let people know. I mean, this is the true 30 frames per second. Nobody else is telling you these things. Nobody else is digging out. Nobody has these archives that I have, for crying out loud. Right? At least you don't see them anywhere. People are in denial that this stuff is. People come on and off of this show, and the moment I put up like some proof picture, they're like, "Oh my God." And then you see they quick leave. They hide. Oh, you mean they had cameras 160 years ago? Anyway. Good morning. Talk to you tomorrow, probably.